Welcome to today's Explainer. We are bringing some serious energy today because we're diving headfirst into an ancient text that perfectly illustrates the ultimate, out-of-control domino effect. It is literally a masterclass in how quickly human conflicts can completely spiral. We're looking at a story of escalation so extreme, it basically redefines the entire concept of retaliation.
So you have to ask yourself, how does a simple domestic dispute over a denied bride escalate into a one-man war that leaves 1,000 people dead? It sounds like the plot of some blockbuster action thriller, right? But this is straight out of our historical source text. We're going to map out every single step of this staggering escalation, tracing a path from a locked bedroom door all the way to a battlefield just littered with bodies.
All right, let's get into Section 1, a denied bride.
So the inciting incident here isn't some massive geopolitical conflict. It actually starts as this incredibly personal, almost gossipy family drama right in the middle of the wheat harvest. Samson shows up to visit his wife with a peace offering, a young goat, and he confidently announces, "I will go into my wife into the chamber." But he hits a literal wall. His father-in-law completely blocks him from entering. Now, what's just staggering here is the father's excuse. He tells Samson, "I verily thought that thou hadst utterly hated her." So what did he do? He just gave Samson's wife away to Samson's companion. And then, to try and smooth over this catastrophic misstep, the father makes this wildly inappropriate counteroffer. He says, "Isn't her younger sister fairer? Please just take her instead." The sheer audacity of this domestic rejection sets the entire violent narrative into motion.
And that brings us to this absolutely pivotal quote from Samson. "Now shall I be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure." This single sentence right here acts as the spark for literally everything that follows. Samson is establishing his justification. In his mind, the social contract has been completely shredded by his father-in-law's actions. He is officially taking the gloves off, and he considers himself entirely blameless for the absolute chaos he's about to unleash on the Philistines.
Which brings us to Section 2, 300 Flaming Foxes.
Now, if you thought Samson was going to file a formal complaint or just walk away, you are deeply mistaken. The retaliation gets wildly disproportionate incredibly fast. 300. Just pause and let that number sink in for a second. Think about the sheer logistical absurdity of this. Samson doesn't just go set a quick fire. No, he goes out and physically catches 300 foxes. This is deeply calculated, incredibly time-consuming, and highly orchestrated vengeance.
This brilliantly illustrates the ancient destructive ingenuity at play here. He executes this flawless four-step plan. First, he catches the 300 foxes. Then, he turns them tail to tail. Next, he places a burning torch in the midst between two tails, and finally, he just lets them loose into the standing corn of the Philistines. The resulting inferno is absolute devastation. The text tells us he burned up the shocks, the standing corn, the vineyards, and the olives. He completely wipes out their entire agricultural infrastructure and their livelihood in one massive, sweeping act of arson.
Moving right along to Section 3, a cycle of vengeance.
Okay, so we've now entered this unstoppable cycle of violent cause and effect, where every single action forces an even darker reaction. The Philistines look at the smoking ashes of their crops and naturally ask, "Who hath done this?" They investigate, and they quickly discover the motive. They find out it was Samson, because his Timnite father-in-law had taken his wife and given her to his companion. But here's the twist. The Philistines don't go after Samson right away. Instead, they respond with a gruesome escalation against the very people who started the dispute in the first place. They go up and burn Samson's wife and her father with fire. So the exact tragedy the father-in-law was likely trying to avoid has now come upon his house in the most horrific way imaginable.
Notice how rapidly things are spiraling here. We go from a tense wheat harvest dispute to agricultural arson, straight to the brutal murder of the wife and father. And Samson's response to this murder, he basically tells them, "Though ye have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will cease." He smites them, as the text famously says, hip and thigh with a great slaughter. Complete and total carnage. After this massive strike, Samson retreats and completely isolates himself. He goes down and dwells in the top of the rocky tom.
3,000. The escalation just keeps going. The Philistines march up, pitch in Judah, and spread themselves out in Lehi to capture Samson. The men of Judah, absolutely terrified of their Philistine overlords, assemble an overwhelming force. 3,000 men of Judah march to the top of the rock Etam. Think about that. 3,000 men mobilized to confront one single man.
So the crucial point is, when the men of Judah confront him, asking, "What is this that thou hast done unto us?" Samson replies with his chilling simplicity. He says, "As they did unto me, so have I done unto them." It is the ultimate unapologetic eye for an eye philosophy. To him, this isn't some unprovoked attack. It's basic, reciprocal accounting.
Now, the men of Judah are caught in a terrible spot, and they remind Samson, "Knowest thou not that the Philistines are rulers over us?" They're stuck in the middle, just trying to prevent a full-scale war. They tell Samson they've come to bind him and deliver him directly to the Philistines. Surprisingly, Samson agrees to surrender, but he initiates a very tense negotiation first. He makes his own people swear that they won't fall upon him themselves. Once Judah agrees to just bind him and not kill him, they tie him up fast with 2 brand new cords and bring him up from the rock.
And here we are, Section 4, the Jawbone Massacre.
This right here is the explosive climax of our story. Samson is bound, surrounded by enemies, and entirely unarmed. When he arrives at Lehi, the Philistines finally see their tormentor in chains. They start shouting against him, celebrating their apparent triumph. But their celebration? Wildly premature. The text tells us that the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. In an instant, this supernatural strength surges through him. Those 2 brand new cords binding his arms literally become as flax that was burnt with fire, and his bands just loose right off his hands.
1,000. Hit pause on that. That is the staggering body count of the absolute carnage that immediately follows the snapping of those cords.
Unarmed and completely surrounded, Samson finds a weapon of pure, desperate improvisation. He reaches out and grabs a new, fresh jawbone of an ass, a donkey. It's crude, it's heavy, and it is devastating. With just this fresh jawbone in his hand, he single-handedly slaughters 1,000 men. When the dust finally settles and the battle ends, he casts the weapon out of his hand and actually renames the location. He calls the place Ramaphli, cementing his bloody victory into the very geography of the land itself.
And right in the immediate aftermath, Samson delivers this poetic, terrifying boast. Just listen to the rhythm of the text here. With the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, with the jaw of an ass have I slain 1,000 men. He is literally standing victorious amidst heaps of bodies, a one-man army marveling at his own devastating capability.
Finally, we reach Section 5, Thirst and Deliverance.
But check this out. Immediately following this godlike display of martial dominance, the adrenaline crashes hard. The physical toll of fighting 1,000 men sets in, and Samson is suddenly fiercely mortal again. He becomes sorest thirst. Desperately parched and utterly exhausted, his triumphant boasting turns into a deeply vulnerable plea. He calls on the Lord, saying, "Thou hast given this great deliverance into the hand of thy servant. And now shall I die for thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised?" It's a really fascinating juxtaposition. The invincible warrior is suddenly on the brink of death, not from enemy swords, but from a simple lack of water.
The whole narrative resolves with a miraculous provision. God cleaves a hollow place that was in the jaw, and water flows straight out of it. Samson drinks, his spirit comes again, and he completely revives. Because of this deliverance, he names the spring En-Hakkore, which remains in Lehi to this day. And from the ashes of this intensely personal, shockingly violent chain of events, a completely new political reality emerges. The text concludes by noting that Samson judged Israel in the days of the Philistines for 20 years.
Which leaves us with this final, massive question to consider. Looking back at the sheer scale of the destruction, from the flaming foxes to the Jawbone massacre, was Samson's path a necessary triumph of justice against an oppressive ruler? Or was it simply a tragic, devastating cycle of endless retaliation? It is a profound thought to take away from this text. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the story.